I did something. And no, it's not just this amazing title screen to my new game engine game, which is what I'm going to call the game because why not? On this amazing title screen, we can start a local game or start a multiplayer game. Actually, right now, the start multiplayer game starts the local game, but we'll get there. Or I can quit, just like this. Okay, now that we're back, um, maybe not quit again, but I can change the volume that you hear in the menu. Very cool. Yeah, totally. Well, let's start a game. It's going to take a couple minutes. Actually, it'll take about 38 seconds with the size of the world I have set up. And yes, I do remember that it takes exactly 38 seconds for the terrain to load in. Cool, we're in the game. It only took 38 seconds. And here is my beautiful terrain, which generates on simplex noise. More on that later. Look at this beautiful Minecraft grass block texture that I have on everything. Another thing I did was the Amogus. There are now 4 Amoguses, and they each have a text above them following me. Now, when I had originally set up the Amogus, it was like right here in between these two on a axis. And so the text was a little easier to make spin, and I had to fix the text because it didn't work properly when I moved them. But now they should work no matter where I place them. As for the other part of the project, I'm supposed to make this terrain have physics. So let's go ahead and get into a nice viewing position and spawn in a cube. Or maybe 2, 3, however many I want. Wow, the physics works. The physics has a 1-to-1 mapping with the terrain, which is just made using a world object grid. I create a grid, and based on the x and y values, a z value is formed, or height. And so I basically have a 2D vector of height values that gets mapped over into here. And then, boom, terrain. Code-wise, the first thing I did was I made the terrain. In the header file here, the biggest thing to notice is that I have a map size constant, which is just set to 1024. That's how big the map is right now. And the generate noise function, which is how I get my height values. So if we go into the implementation file, down here is my generate noise. We create a 2D vector, which is just a vector of vectors, and that vector has a size of map size, and then all the internal vectors have a size of map size. So then I seed the terrain so that whenever you load up the world, the terrain's a little different. Right now it's just adding to the x and y values when I go to generate the height value. So to do this, I create a simplex object using a script that I found online. The simplex noise script that I found is under an MIT license, so I'm allowed to use it. It's just open source. It is by Sebastian Rombautz. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I'll link in the description a link to the repository for the script, just so if anybody stumbles upon this and wants to use the simplex noise or wants to look at it, it'll be there. But after I've created that, I call the fractal function, which takes 8 octaves, takes an x position, which I also add the terrain seed to, a y position, I add the terrain seed to, and it returns a height value. And then I multiply that height value by 30 so that we have a range of -30 to 30, because the function will return a float between -1 and 1. As for the rest of the terrain, I just had to map the height grid to a physics grid. And that was fairly simple because the professor gave us most of the code for that. I had to change it up a little bit. The row scale and column scale are 1-to-1 instead of this. This kind of messed it up a lot. And then I had to move it to line up in the same position as my actual terrain. The other thing I have to do is put a skin on it. I mean, I didn't have to, I could have just colored it, but I felt like it looked nicer having the Minecraft grass texture. The second thing I did in this project was a little bit more complicated, I think, than the actual terrain. I was trying to track down the loading screen, and I did some step through debugging and found that the loading screen comes up when I call the GLV init. So I just pulled down the init function from the parent to my module GLVO and pretty much just copied everything, put it in, wanted to leave in the copyright thing saying that I'm not allowed to use this for commercial uses, blah, blah, blah. I just wanted to pass the class and add my own loading screen. So I left everything the same except for the manager windowing draw loading screen. So the problem was in here because this is where the loading screen gets drawn. And this had a if statement. This is the if statement that got called or branched to on my system. It called another function. That function was protected, so I also had to bring that down and rewrite it in here. The only things that I changed was I got rid of the border by changing these two floats from 1.95 to 2, and I changed this vector from a 1, 0, 0 to a 0, 0, 0, which just makes the screen black. And then the initialization will finish and do what it normally would have done. So after I figured out how to set up the actual loading screen to not be all colorful and just be black, I set it to go into just a GUI. And the GUI is my start menu, but it technically has the whole world loaded, or as much of the world as it knows to load. I don't set a skybox, and I don't do anything like physics or networking. All I have is some menu sound, because who doesn't like to listen to Minecraft music, and a GUI.